So good morning everybody, dear students, dear colleagues. I'm delighted to welcome you at the session 3, Providing Leadership for Sustainable Development, the Role of Higher Education. After the celebration yesterday, it is now time to reflect and discuss about one of the topics that is indeed a priority in the future of the Bologna process beyond 2020. The Sustainable Development Goals are set by the United Nations to achieve a more sustainable future for all. They each are specific and interconnected at the same time. Working toward this goal requires skilled people and the right kind of policies, innovative solutions, and constructive collaboration on many fields. Interdisciplinary teaching, learning, and research at university have a key role to play. For higher education institutions, these goals require a deep rethinking on traditional education and design of innovative research projects and programs. It is our ambition to empower higher education and research system in the European higher education area to play a more strategic and effective role in meeting these goals by identifying and sharing powerful arguments, attractive incentives, and good practice already implemented in the academia. During the first part of the session, we will be inspired by 2 keynote speeches that will soon follow, and after the break, we will be actively engaged in a roundtable discussion. So let me introduce the first keynote speaker, that is Hilligje, I hope I will pronounce it right, Hilligje van Land, the Secretary General of the International Association of Universities and Executive Director of the International University Bureau. She represents IAU in various working groups and expert committees, including the Council of Europe, where she is contributing to intercultural understanding initiative and development of a European framework for competencies to democratic citizenship. She immediately engaged when she became Secretary General the association in a strategic partnership to advance higher education for sustainable development and represented IAU at external events to foster leadership, engagement, and advance actions. So it is my pleasure to invite Hilligje on the stage.
So we're a very warm welcome. I hope you see me. I would like to welcome you here to this session. I saw in the program that the competition is very harsh between the different sessions that are being offered here to discuss the future of Bologna, actually, and of the European higher education area. So I thank you for having chosen this one, and I look forward to the debates that we will have at the end of the session. I would like to thank Alessandra for inviting me to come here to the stage and to be one of the 2 or 3 keynote speakers. I will right from the start say that we are very complementary and that I thus also took out of my presentation much of what is called the student involvement in the whole higher education and research for sustainable development debates, because we have 2 excellent speakers who know much better than me where it should go and how it should go and what is being done today. So I'll leave that part to you, but we will have a discussion definitely. So I'm very pleased to be here and honored also to speak at this illustrious conference, because it's a bit as an outsider that I will look inside of what is happening into the Bologna process, in the sense that IAU is global and not only Europe. So let's see how we combine the 2. Let's see. So my topic is really about leading change and how leadership, but also the entire global higher education community, can engage with Agenda 2030 and all the different sustainable development goals. And I would like to already announce that one of the topics that I would like to elaborate during my presentation is much more bigger attention to inter and multidisciplinarity in higher education. And you will see why and how this actually should resonate with much that we do in higher education. We talk a lot about it, but I'm not too sure always that the implementation of inter- and multidisciplinarity in higher education is something that is easy to do and resonates fully with what we do today, even in Europe and even beyond. So how does this work? Do I have to point there? Yes. The Bologna process beyond 2020, we heard very good presentations and opening speeches yesterday. It really calls for strong investment in people's skills and education, largely speaking. It calls for enhanced social cohesion in Europe, even beyond what we've been able to achieve today. The ultimate aim is to actually foster human welfare, human well-being. So it calls for what? Transversal skills, problem solving, we've been told yesterday, critical thinking and creativity. But is that really what we foster through the higher education that we provide in the institutions today? There are many mechanisms that have been put in place. Stefania Giannini alluded to a few, for instance, at the global level, like the Global Convention on the Recognition of Diplomas, which actually allows to build trust in systems. And that is also what the Bologna process has been doing over the 20 last years. It enhances mobility flows due to better understanding of the systems themselves and of the institutions. Yet we still see that there is some mistrust in where we send our students and how we send them and how it resonates once the student come back home. So there is room for improvement, and I would say there is still some 20 years to go before we get anywhere with that agenda in particular. So the Bologna process came with new ideas and initiatives, and the latest one is the European University Initiative, and I would like to show how that resonates with something else that we do at the level of the IAU. So where do we speak from? Where do I speak from? As IAU Secretary General, IAU is the global voice of higher education because we reach out to higher education institutions globally. The association was created in 1950 under the auspices of UNESCO, and we're still based at UNESCO headquarters in Paris. And we're a non-governmental organization, which allows us to sit in a very comfortable seat, or uncomfortable one, because we actually respond to much of what the governments are doing. And we hope that we engage in constructive discussions and dialogues to advance the agenda of higher education globally. So what do we offer? We basically and mainly offer a space for discussion, for debate, for networking. And that's absolutely key, but not just any kind of networking. I've had very interesting discussions over the last few days in different fora, and again at the dinner table, where I see that still today when we talk about networking, we talk about strategic partnerships. And the strategic partnerships very quickly resonate with partnerships that actually go for the same kind of institutions, even beyond our borders. So we restrict our ability to actually really network the systems in a way that would maybe be more conducive to innovation. But let's see, we can discuss. Then we provide advisory services, training, peer-to-peer learning, global advocacy and representation as well, and we represent the global higher education community at many UN instances, for instance, and that is what Alessandra was also alluding to. Alessandra will come with us to New York in July to the high-level political forum called Into Life a few years ago, and where we will make the case for the role of higher education for sustainable development. We may have a chance to speak about that. We also provide research. You may know the now world-renowned study on internationalization of higher education, which is a global survey that we carry out every 4 years, and the next one is about to be issued, and it will be sent out to the members and the global higher education community in September. We'll also do a global survey on the state of higher education and research for sustainable development, for that matter, and many of you have taken part in that one. Then representation, obviously, like here, and we have publications that are issued at the outset. So it's unique networking opportunities with key stakeholders from around the world, and it's the key stakeholders that we have to rethink on a continuous basis, because it's not only always the same kind, same size, same people, but really the diversity that we foster. And on which basis do we do that? On a set of values that will resonate with you as they resonate as well with the Magna Carta. So it's ethics, it's integrity, it's equity and solidarity, and cooperation, not competition. It is global responsibility towards all communities. That also, the word here, most important, is all. Appreciation of diversity. We had long discussions yesterday about the linguistic diversity of EHEA, and that we're moving slowly into more of the Anglo-Saxon world due to the use of English, but we should definitely also appreciate diversity through linguistic diversity and foster that through everything that we do also in the EHEA. Then quality in learning and teaching, and quality is something that we can debate. Academic freedom and institutional autonomy, which are two concepts that certainly are not last and certainly not the least. So our membership is broad-based. We're really global from the 5 continents, 600 plus institutions, and the University of Bologna is a founding member of the IAU and very much involved in much that we do. They lead, for instance, the work on SDG 5, gender equality, but they network with other SDGs as well, as we will see later. And we work with many intergovernmental partners like UNESCO, the World Bank, the Council of Europe, OECD, and many associations, including EUA and the Magna Carta Universitatum Observatory. I was mixing the two words. So what do we want to do? We want to represent the diversity of higher education in the organizations and influence the discussion on higher education at the global level to actually advance dynamic leadership role for higher education in society. We're too often, as institutions and systems, still rocked by our governments, not only locally, but also at regional level. And what IU really advocates for is stronger role for higher education. And that role can only be enhanced through better understanding by the policymakers and by better support from society at large. The mission is to promote collaboration among the members of the IAU, but also of all the members of the higher education community at large. And that sounds like huge, but it is possible. We pursue the creation, dissemination, and application of knowledge. We advocate for policy and practice that respect the diversity that I talked about earlier, and we focus on equity and social responsibility. We act as a forum for innovation, and the innovation is in the room and not with us, and we hope that we contribute to sharing that, and to mutual learning and understanding, and certainly for joint action. So the strategic plan is based on 4 key priority areas: values-based leadership, and that is something that probably you debate a lot in your institutions; fair and ethical internationalization of higher education, not only one movement from north to south or south to south, but really south to north and all directions, so that we are really looking at internationalization in a different perspective as well. And there again, to many different institutions. We had a very interesting discussion just now about the internationalization of the University of Bologna that is really trying to foster innovative approaches to internationalization and really send out students to unexpected places, because that is where the future is actually lying. Technology in higher education, that was alluded to yesterday, and there are many issues there, and higher education and research for sustainable development, and that's why I've been invited here. So universities, as we know ourselves in the room, contributes a lot to shaping society. Yet that case is still to be made to many stakeholders outside of the university, unfortunately. Knowledge and education should be global common goods, and universities are to teach and educate not only students, but citizens and the future leaders, to develop whole of institution approaches to teaching and learning, which means that we actually all have to work together within an institution and to really give the students the role they have to play to develop what is quality higher education. That's what you probably will be talking about. The universities are to undertake research, but not just whatever research, but responsible research to foster community engagement and solidarity locally and globally, and to develop partnerships that are strategic, but the word strategic needs to be rethought on a daily basis with society, civil society, the private sector, local authorities, decision makers, other universities and HEIs. So beyond 2020, 20 years of transformation indeed. We've been talking about that yesterday as well. The sector is changing very rapidly. It is growing exponentially. and it comes with challenges. In the World Higher Education Database that is maintained by the IAU, we now already list 19,500 higher education institutions around the world. And that does not even include the private higher education sector, the single discipline institutions, nor the very young ones that are popping up, like in Nigeria, for instance. There are 30 new institutions on a yearly basis. They're not listed in the WED because they need to first also prove that they will be there to stay. But we accompany them. We have a special status, observer status, where we then network institutions together so that these new institutions also have an opportunity to develop in the way that is more conducive to serving their own societies. The student population was alluded yesterday to that as well by Stefania Giannini, for instance. It doubled over the last 20 years. We already are at some 210 million students, and the number is expected to rise to at least 300 million by 2030. We have 8 million faculty expected to rise to 22 million in 2030. So the pressures are internal and very strong, but there are also external, and in particular called into life by the transformation that are those of the world of work. And that is being discussed in another place, but it has a direct impact also on the way in which higher education institutions engage with Agenda 2030. So the challenges are multiple, and the key words you know. Globalization. How does that work? Where are universities now positioning themselves in the global market? Massification, that we've just talked about. 49% of all individuals in the OECD countries will graduate at least once in higher education. The lifelong learning agenda is also growing. Competition, there are many new entrants, new ways of working, and all of that is challenging the status quo. The digitalization agenda is absolutely essential as well, as it transforms the way in which we teach. It challenges the professors, the teachers, the researchers, and the way in which we deliver and practice what we do in all the missions of the university. Then consumerism. That is something that is popping up very strongly in North America already, but also in Europe, in the UK, I would say as the most prominent example, but it is coming to many of the European universities as well. The students are becoming clients and they want something else. And they also want more short-term results and impacts of the kind of education that they get, but not only, and you will hear from the students that they refuse this approach, and they're right so. But at the same time, we see that that is one of the tensions as well. Populism, that we face too much in Europe these days, and we have to really make sure that universities contribute to fighting that. And then there's the privatization agenda and the public disengagement of in universities. So the values even upon which to build our systems is under stress, and it calls for different kinds of leaderships that will be able to address these issues. So the tensions are manifold. So it's the global versus the local. It is the universal versus the particular. It's the tradition versus the modernity. Do you want to continue to teach always in the same way? How are you challenged to do it differently? How do you put in place new mechanisms? Is your staff and is your administration ready? What does modernity mean, and how do you combine the different ways in which we do what we do? Then there is the spiritual versus the very material aspects. There's the long-term versus the short-term. The competition is rampant, is everywhere. And it's very positive because it pushes you forward. But the competition also comes with other tensions that sometimes is detrimental to something that universities are supposed to deliver as well on the long term. And there is equality there as well, a very big agenda. We give access to many in the higher education systems, but do we also guarantee success, and how does that work? Then there is the expansion of knowledge versus the ability to assimilate such knowledge. And this all comes from the Delors report. So it's old, 20 years of tension still. And there are new ones. The economic growth and the degrowth, the rising vulnerability of too many, the growing inequality for too many, the increased ecological stress around the world, and the impacts of that. We see it in this room where there's no, way out of the heat, and it's good because it may heat up the discussions also as we go along. There's demand for professional qualifications from higher education, while at the same time, higher education institutions are supposed to educate the intellectuals. They're supposed to train the research, and through research, and that's a tension. Then there is this huge tension between national identities and the emergence of transnational forms of citizenships. And to this one, I would like to add what struck me yesterday. Many people said we need a strong Europe that is European. Yes, of course. But we cannot live in isolation, so Europe will only exist in the context of the world. So there as well, there is a regional identity versus the emergence of many other agendas that are global. So in this context, what is higher education to do? I'll repeat, teach and educate the leaders, the decision makers, the new business leaders of today and tomorrow, and the innovators. It is citizenship and democratic citizenship that higher education institutions in Europe, at least, are fostering. But we would hope that this would be a trend in many other parts of the world as well. And that is under discussion also with the Magna Carta Charter that is being revisited these days to include and to start dialogues around the world. So we have to uphold the values to safeguard the planet. We have to raise awareness for societal needs at local and global levels. We have to engage with local, national, regional, international, and global issues. And at the same time, we have to engage in very narrow and strict research topics because they will inform the rest. So we have to generate new knowledge, and we also have to ensure that that resonates with different kinds of knowledge in different parts of Europe, but also in different parts of the world. So enriching, empowering, bridging gaps, fostering talent, generate and share knowledge, foster diversity and creativity. That's one of the key messages that I would hope that the Bologna in the next 20 years would continue to foster very strongly. And it needs to involve everyone in the institution, the faculty, the students, but also all people of staff in and for society. So the role of students is key. Again, they will be talking about it. But the students need to be involved in everything because they will also allow to better understand what kind of quality, quality means, quality of higher education, and how it will be conducive to develop the kind of knowledge that we need for today and for tomorrow. And the tools are manifold, but include a different kind of internationalization, a different approach and use of technology, and a different way to use our ability to engage with sustainable development goals. And the Agenda 2030 may be the framework for us to use and in which we can actually develop the kind of work that we do. So values-based institutional leadership is part and parcel of the Sustainable Development Agenda. Leadership is indeed a core aspect of quality higher education. It is absolutely vital in enabling institutions to respond to complex challenges, rapid pace of change, and multiple responsibilities. Without engaging the leadership, we will not be able to transform our societies in the way that we need to transform it to better respond to the challenges that we face. For the IAU in particular, but also for the EUA, inscribed also in the Magna Carta, and we see it in many aspects of the development of Bologna, values-based and responsible higher education leadership calls for less commodification of education. That's a big challenge that you as rectors do face. For more equity, also a big challenge, for working within an ethical framework and ensuring that higher education and research institutions contribute to and are recognized as essential for sustainable development of democratic societies. Because universities are too often not seen as the key partner to the development of that. And that's the case that we will make in New York again. It's quite amazing to see that we will come together with the AUF, the Francophone University Association, the ACU, the Association of Commonwealth Universities, and the IAU the International Association of Universities, we've signed an agreement to work together in advancing higher education and research for sustainable development. And together we bring to New York some 25 higher education institutions. But apart from that, the high-level political forum doesn't give much space or recognition to what comes out of universities, in particular the education that is so key to our societies and the kind of research that can inform the policy making around the world. So count on us to making that point very strongly. And the Bologna process should pay special attention to values-based leadership development, and we hope that that can be part of the discussions. Then technology, I saw many people nodding. There's a lot of impact in higher education today, but it needs to be channeled, it needs to be framed, it needs to be organized, because it needs to call for better inclusion, but inclusion of what? Also inclusion of different knowledge systems. It should not become one model fits all, but on the contrary, really be conducive of sharing the diversity that we need to develop the kind of societies in which we wish to live. So it's important that the Bologna process here should also develop kind of preventive actions, and I was not too sure when I developed this that that was the best way, because that is reactive and it is protective. But the Bologna process should definitely look into the transformation and the digitalization of higher education strongly in order for it to be channeled in ways that will be conducive to a better quality of higher education. And so that technological revolutions actually fulfills its promises, because it comes with many. Then the internationalization of higher education is not something that comes in a tick box where you just send people, they come back, and you just continue with business as usual. On the contrary, it's an intentional process, and it needs to be linked fully with the Agenda 2030. Why do you internationalize your higher education institutions? To what end? What purpose? With whom? And how do you actually frame it? And how do you then engage those who have been mobile, if it is physical mobility, or mobile intellectually, or mobile through technologies? How do you then involve the new knowledge that they've been acquiring along the way, along that journey? And how do you include that? Or how do you install in the institution a dialogical perspective on the connecting the realities, connecting the knowledge systems, because that is absolutely essential, and it will be conducive to developing the kind of internationalization at home that would then benefit the majority, because you know that in terms of mobility, physical mobility, we're still at a mere 10% of the higher education population globally, and in certain countries it's way lower than that. And it doesn't matter, because if we all start to engage in mobility, and we all jump on planes, trains, and the rest, we're also defeating the purposes of sustainable development. So that's not the aim. But the aim is to really engage with internationalization in a different way, to really build bridges between those in your internationalization offices, those who participate in the processes, those who participate in internationalization of the research agenda, to really also always keep in mind the Agenda 2030 and the 17 development goals. So there I would call the Bologna process to pay particular attention to develop fair and equitable internationalization across Europe and beyond. Because there again, yesterday, it was really striking that all those who were talking about strategic partnerships were again and again looking at Oxford will actually connect with maybe La Sorbonne, maybe Bologna, maybe, and always pick and choose the cherries that are alike. They will put them in a basket and they will develop many beautiful things. But think of developing the kind of internationalization strategies that are thinking out of the box and that would be as valuable as all the others. So higher education and research. Why does it come at the end? Because actually it is to bring together all the other aspects. Future well-being of humanity and the planet depends on the successful resolution of the interconnected challenges of, on the one hand, economic aspects, social aspects, cultural aspects, and environmental sustainability. It was beautiful to hear the choir sing yesterday. It was beautiful to hear the music yesterday. Without cultural connects, we will also get nowhere. So we need to take that on board very strongly. And culture goes way beyond that. It goes to the different humanities that we should never forget. And we see that is too often being rocked as well around the world. I could give too many examples of countries where it is deemed that history teaching, geography, philosophy are not needed anymore in our higher education institutions. And that is a disaster. Because the future will not thrive if we all go for only a few disciplines and if we restrict the capacity of our future communities going through higher education to acquire the kind of intellectual perspective on the world that we need. So the 2030 Development Agenda and the SDGs is really a framework for university collaboration. We've not been invited to the table. We're not mentioned that much in the agenda. And many say, what do we do with that strange agenda that is more for policymakers? Actually, universities do engage with the Sustainable Development Goals in many different ways that are really conducive to innovation, to transformation, to really network the things that universities do, but in a more dynamic way. And I would hope that the EHEA and the Bologna process in the next few years would embrace that very strongly. We had discussions with the EUA saying that the European Commission, don't know if they're in the room, but is yet not really convinced that that is a way to go. What does it mean? There are no projects that are being funded. There's no money to get for huge projects. And that is detrimental to the future. So if the EHEA would start, on the other hand, and would really put it at the heart of everything that it does for the future, then the funding mechanisms will also be put in place to make that happen. So we have a real role to play in this forum here these days and in the next few years to develop that and to push for a transformation that will actually bring the money to the words that we all say, but that we need more capacity for in order to move the agendas into the future. Higher education is a global common good. It's too often forgotten. It needs more support. It needs supports from the governments. It needs support from society. And that's where very often your institutions are called to the task to actually showcase how they serve society. You're always called to defend yourselves. But it should be the other way around. Let them tell you why higher education doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? There's this famous phrase by Nelson Mandela, you think that education is expensive, try ignorance. That is key to everything that we should also be very much aware of. So higher education is essential. And yes, maybe there are not all the people in society who benefit from it in a direct way, but indirectly, the whole society benefits. And so governments need to not let go of their beautiful higher education systems, but on the contrary, to foster it and support it more strongly. So what we developed at the IAU is a global cluster on higher education and research for sustainable development. It's a bit like the European university networks that some of you are embarking on. And what I wanted to do, this was actually kind of a dream come true, is to network institutions from around the world in a different way. So what we did was a call out to universities in all 5 continents to take the lead on one of the SDGs. You will say, okay, new silos. No, not new silos, different silos. And a networking of capacities from around the world. So Bologna has volunteered for SDG 5, and very quickly they said, but we work on many other things. Yes, and so they get involved in many of the other clusters at the same time. Because it's not, if you work on gender equality, it is directly linked to many of the other SDGs, food security, peace, name it. All the different aspects that are actually listed in a very simplistic overview of what is at stake in our societies today. But you need one institution to brilliantly take it up. Bologna does it for gender equality. Many other institutions do it from other things, for other things. And what we wanted to really do is also not have only Europe taking the lead or North America. No. all parts of the world had the opportunity to engage with one of the goals. And then next, what? They all had a very difficult puzzle to complete. They had to pick and choose 5 institutions from the different continents. It seemed evident, not that easy, was it? Because you then have to engage with Latin America, with Asia, with all that comes with it, and network and build a program to actually address issues in a concerted way for the future of our planet. So we set course for the next 15 years. We hope that all the universities will not abandon but stay on board and that it will grow. So you have lead institutions, satellites around it, and these satellites each work with 5 again. So you see a bit of the spider web constructing itself around the world. What do these cluster groups do? They organize conferences, events, they engage in monitoring, developing, reporting, and that will advance and show how universities are absolutely key to transforming our societies and engage with the Sustainable Development Goals. IAU is taking the lead on Goal 17 for obvious reasons, I hope. So the partnerships for the goals is illustrated by what you see on the screen, and you see that it is really everywhere, that it is really in the unexpected areas as well, that the institutions have taken the lead on each and every SDG. So if 14, for instance, is with the University of Bergen, 14 is working with Ghana and is working with Colombia. And so it is these dynamics of interchange that really make the difference. SDG 13 on climate action, that is one that is led by the University of the West Indies, and they embark in a huge project globally, also networking the different realities. I'm running out of time, no? A bit. So the cluster on HESD is to really promote the role of higher education, and we believe in this room that we're all convinced of that, but we have to make that case much more strongly, so relate to the societies outside of the institution, always make the case to our rectors' conference, to our ministries, engage with our governments and make the case to them so that they embark with us on everything that is happening inside so that it can be developed much better. The cluster works on all the dimensions of the SDGs that is absolutely essential to note, combining the economic, the social, the cultural, the environmental sustainability aspects, and the cultural dimension, which is always forgotten a bit. I made that case in that plea already. It goes also through the humanities, and it is very important to uphold that strongly in any of your institutions. The peer-to-peer learning sparks new ideas and creativity. It is fascinating to see how these networks that are being created and will be created in Europe, for that matter, with the European university networks, will also generate a new kind of togetherness, a new kind and better understanding of the challenges at stake, and how there's not only one way to solve the issues, but there's so many, and we have to network the approaches so that in the future we can make the difference that we need. And the future actually is today. So collaboration, 16 lead institutions, at least five institutions, cross SDG links, joint projects and initiatives, and the frame is a cluster as a whole. And we hope that you will all be interested to embark in the future to build that network even more strongly, because what we are is a global community of higher education institutions, and together we can make the case to our governments that things are to change. Giannini said it yesterday as well, that UNESCO is embarking on that more strongly. On the agenda, hopefully in the future, there will be a World Conference on Higher Education, and that's where we will invite you to the table to make the case for all this. So the future of Bologna, what would that be? I would say we can propose that the 17 SDGs are a possible framework for cross-border European higher education cooperation. And then, if that is stronger, also see how that resonates with the rest of the world and keep that in mind. Really call the Bologna process to link up internationalization, technology, education and research for sustainable development in a new way. To really don't see that as separate entities, but bring them together and look at those through maybe a same lens, or at least a similar lens, so that we can make the transformation happen. Then At the heart of it, centrally, is to foster interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity. How does that work? What does it mean? I've heard many examples from around the world, and I also see that there are many struggles there on how to implement it. And we work a lot, for instance, with the quality assurance agencies to make sure that the quality assurance mechanisms are in place to recognize the value of inter and multidisciplinarity and how that works. Because that's sometimes the difficulty. We will also work with many journals, research journals, peer-reviewed journals, where you see that inter and multidisciplinary approaches to research topics are less picked up, and they're not being published, they're not being recognized in the same way. And then we also fight a lot with the ranking mechanisms. That you can count on us that we try to deconstruct them, or at least to revisit them so that they become better in the future. If they're there to stay, we'd better to be all very much aware of what it represents and be very critical when we take part in any of those. The latest born, the SDG ranking developed by THE, I would invite you to be very careful if you ever engage with it, and not take it for something that is conducive to any transformation. So that will be my little note. Anti-publicity. So we need to continue to develop structural frameworks in the Bologna process and the EHEA, in particular also in quality recognition, quality assurance mechanisms. But then the next line is absolutely key. Safeguard flexibility. Let's make sure we don't imprison ourselves in frameworks that will not allow to go to the line before, interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity, and the connect of different realities. So let's hope that the future of Bologna is really conducive to strengthening Europe, even more strongly so, and also conducive to fighting the opposing dynamics that we see too often now in Europe, so that they contribute to promoting democracy, critical citizenship, and foster the way forward to fair and ethical relations with all regions in Europe and with the world. I look forward to the discussions, and thank you for your attention.